Hello, everyone. It's your friend the Nightwalker, and I'm back with part two of I basically call it the 50th anniversary uh, Manson movies. And in the first movie, I talked about. Okay, see, back in 2019, last year, there were three movies that came out that basically came out to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the Manson Tate LaBianca murders. And, there were, one was considered really, really, really fantastic, which was Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You have one that was considered really, really, really terrible, which was The Haunting of Sharon Tate. And then you had the one that pretty much is kind of nobody really even knew existed, which was Charlie Says, directed by Mary Herron. And that one is that's the one I covered in the first video, so I'm not going to really be explaining too much more about that. I've already said what all I needed to say. So this here is going to be talking about the other two movies. I'm going to try to get all my thoughts into one video. So so I'm not sitting here making a whole series of videos about it. I think two should be more than enough to say what I need to say. So we'll go ahead and get started. Now, you know, now we get to the one movie. We already talked about the one that nobody knew, which was, Charlie Says. Now we're going to talk about the one that everybody absolutely hated, which was The Haunting of Sharon Tate. Now this movie here, I've seen it. I don't own it. I'm not really in any great big hurry to get my hands on it, to be honest with you. It's really exploitation. I mean, I get it. It's revisionist history, which that's exactly the same thing what Quentin Tarantino did, but Tarantino did it right, whereas this movie did it pretty much wrong. And in this version, you take the events of what happened, and you in this movie they took it and they basically just tried to turn it into a slasher movie, pretty much. And it's just in this movie you got Hilary Duff. She's playing Sharon Tate. She keeps having all these premonitions and she keeps having these weird dreams, and she's having all kinds of weird supernatural stuff going on. And it turns out that Terry Melcher, he's because Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, they moved into the house that Terry Melcher lived in, and Melcher was a producer that Manson thought was going to give him a record contract and really get his career up and going, but that didn't happen. So ultimately, Manson decided whoever was living in that house that he sent his followers out there, tell them kill whoever's in there, make it look witchy, all this other kind of stuff. Sure, but in this movie, like for example, apparently Terry Melcher left a bunch of his, demo tapes, left a bunch of Manson's demo tapes laying around. So she keeps hearing cease to exist and all this other kind of stuff. And she's being haunted by all these visions, and she keeps seeing things, keeps seeing people and everything else. Of course, you're gonna, the infamous, the one thing I think is funny though, is like in every iteration about the Manson story that I've ever seen, they always do the part where Manson actually came up to the house. This was before the murders. Manson came up to the house looking for Terry Melcher and finding out that he no longer lived there, that he moved, and that now Roman Polanski and his wife Sharon Tate, they now live there. And I believe if you listen to the real life accounts and the real life story, apparently Sharon was working with a photographer, and it was the photographer who went and told Manson, hey, the Terry Melcher doesn't live here anymore. This is now the Polanski residence. Um, Terry's gone, so you have to get out of here. So there's nothing for you here, right? So, but okay, like for example, and the thing was, okay, what made it absolutely even more chilling was the fact that Sharon Tate saw Manson. These two were actually face to face at one point. So it's chilling to sit there and think that Sharon Tate actually looked into the eyes and saw the face of the man who would order her death. So, and that's a creepy aspect, and it's usually in many many versions of the story. I believe now in this version, I believe it was. Oh my God, was it Abigail Folger? I think in this version, I don't remember. But it's like, okay, if you watch like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when they do the scene, Jay Sebring is the one who goes and confronts Manson and tells him, you have to leave. That they don't live here anymore. In I believe the 2004 remake of Helter Skelter, I believe it was Wojciech Frykowski who answered the door and told Manson no, that that they didn't live there anymore. I believe in what was it, the Haunting of Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate herself answers the door and sees Manson standing there. So it's like it's funny how that always changes from every movie version that there is. Um, that's that's the craziest thing. It's like, why does that little detail keep changing? It's always somebody different who comes to the door, but I mean the result is ultimately the same. Is that Sharon Tate still comes up and she looks into the face of Charles Manson, who ordered her murder. I just find that weird. Why they keep changing it? Anyway, so back to what we were saying. But yeah, just this movie just didn't really do it. It didn't hit the mark very well. It's pure exploitation. It's this movie would be, if you, I think that's the thing. It's like also too when you consider the fact that these are real people. These are not just, that's the thing. These were real human beings and they died very needlessly and they didn't need to die very needlessly. And to sit there and just basically turn them into, to take these real human beings and basically just turn them into slasher movie characters, you know, and just to, and it's like, okay, it seems like it's going to do kind of something Tarantino would do because, you're getting to the climax of the movie and, um, we find out that Sharon isn't really crazy, that the Manson family members are coming to kill them. And so, the five victims, they form a united front and they're able to fight them off and everything else. And it's like, yeah, that seems like something Tarantino would have done. Ultimately, to find out, hey, guess what? At the end of the movie, they're all still dead anyway, which makes no sense to the audience. They're all still dead because you see, and basically the movie is just doing this to the audience and say, nope, screw it. They all still died. So this whole movie was kind of like, I think a lot of people feel that way. Like this whole movie really was for nothing, and it just is pure exploitation. It's not. There's very little. There's very little in the way of getting any real facts from this movie. It's just so it's just so fictionalized and stuff that I think a lot of people just couldn't stand it. And that's the thing, usually when you watch these kind of movies, I think like a lot of people hated Brian De Palma's movie Black Dahlia for the same reason. I think people were hoping that the movie would give them some real insight into what actually happened, what was the real story behind this, and people don't gain any facts. Okay, and the same thing here is true of, this movie here. I mean, that's at least now I said, okay, yeah, I'm a little irritated that Charlie says held back some of the information about the Tate and LaBianca murders, specifically to the women's involvement in the crimes. That being said, though, the movie is still, for the most part, is pretty accurately correct. Okay, where this movie really is not. I mean, you just kind of got the characters, and everything else just seems kind of made up. And like I said, it's like if he wanted to do kind of this revisionist history, something Tarantino would do with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, okay, fine. But it's just the way it was executed, the way it was handled was so poor, it just didn't work at all. So, and now we're going to get into the third movie that came out in 2019 about the Manson murders. We're going to talk about Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay, now this is the one that I know this movie does. It's hit and miss with a lot of people. I know a lot of people don't like this movie anyway, and they just, they felt this movie was boring and it really served no purpose or any of that kind of stuff. But I think that's kind of where you're wrong, to be honest with you. It's like this movie, you say, Quentin Tarantino, he, changed some of the facts around. Really what the only fact he really changed was, and if you're a true crime fanatic and you studied on the case and you've ever read any of the books or saw any of the interviews or any of that kind of stuff, you would realize the only thing that Quentin Tarantino really changed was just the fact that, the people who were supposed to die did not die. And spoiler alert, the people who were not supposed to die did die. Okay. So it's like in his version, instead of Sharon Tate and the victims, instead of them being killed, ultimately it's the Manson family members that end up being killed because they decide the whole thing seems like it's heading towards that moment, that climax where the killers are going to, murder the people in the house. But then they end up running into Leonardo DiCaprio's character. And it turns out earlier in the movie, they meet, Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth, and DiCaprio goes out there and he yells at Tex Avery, tells him get off the street and everything else. And this movie, I got to be honest, this movie it's not a horror film. It's not even a suspense thriller, but I was more on edge watching this movie than any of the other ones, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he ends up telling them, hey, don't, get the hell off my street. You hippies don't belong here. You come around again, I'm going to call the cops, blah, 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 and everything else. And so the killers, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Tex Watson, they decide, you know what? Instead of going and killing these people, why don't we go and kill these people? Because they recognize uh, DiCaprio's character. He's playing an actor. His movie career is going down, and Brad Pitt's character plays his stuntman. And the two of them have this brothership, and they're kind of always there for each other in this bond. And then Margot Robbie, who plays Sharon Tate, I'll get to her in just a minute because there's many, many things I want to say about that. But so anyway, they decide, hey, they watched, DiCaprio's character do a lot of killing on TV and stuff. And so they decide, wouldn't it be more making a statement, more prolific if they went ahead and killed the people who taught them to kill? And so, hey, let's go ahead and let's kill him. And so they decide that's what they're going to do and everything else. And so they head up there, and let's just say, they run into, DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character. And let's just say things don't go according to plan. Now, admittedly, the LaBiancas are not mentioned in this movie because obviously, well, as this movie goes, if, the Tate murders don't go down the way they're expected to, then why would the LaBianca murders even happen? So, but, you're going to find out though, like if if you've had any study in this, you're going to find out, for the most part, Tarantino is very accurate about, trying to keep it as close to realism as he could. It's just the only thing that changes is the outcome. And the movie really does, it's mainly about these three characters here. Okay. And I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people feel like this movie really serves no purpose. What is the point of it and everything else? The point is, it's like, there is a lot of character building. You got the character of Rick Dalton, played by DiCaprio. He's a failing actor. He once was a big shot on TV, and essentially he has to do kind of like what Clint Eastwood did. Whereas, if you remember, Clint Eastwood, back in the day, he had a hit TV show called Rawhide, where he played a TV cowboy and everything else. Very similar to what, DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, has to do. He's doing all these, he's doing this TV show. Well, he decides he wants to try to get into movies and stuff like that. And his career is failing. Once Rawhide ended, Clint Eastwood, like that old saying, the man could barely get arrested in Hollywood. And ultimately what ended up happening, he had to go and do movies over in Italy, which has famously become the Man with No Name trilogy. So he did these three movies, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And these movies were gigantic hits. And they helped revitalize his career. So by the time Clint Eastwood came back to Hollywood, he started getting more acting roles, but also, too, Clint Eastwood learned how to direct. So not only was he acting, he was also directing movies as well. So he was able to start building on his career. And, now he's the Clint Eastwood we all know and love today. But, okay, so we got all that going on. And but at the same time, though, too. Now, the one thing that I found kind of irritating was back when the movie first came out, because Margot Robbie does play an intricate part of this movie. And Sharon Tate really does have a big focus in this film. But the thing is like, you had feminist like reporters coming to Tarantino. It's infamous. You can look it up on there, and you look it up on YouTube. They got the videos and stuff where, they put Tarantino down and say, hey, why didn't you make her the whole focus of the movie? Why is it about these two white guys? Why isn't she the focus of the movie? Why doesn't she have more screen time and everything else? But the thing is, it's like, well, for one thing, okay, obviously what we saw in theaters is a cut version, because if you know anything about this movie, one thing that is very, very popular is that supposedly Netflix is putting together basically an extended director's cut of this movie, similar to how they did with Tarantino's movie, The Hateful Eight. And then at some point within the next year or so, I guess they're going to put it on streaming. So, because I believe there's like a 3.5 hour, 4 hour version of this movie. This movie clocks in like about 2 hours, I think, in 40 minutes or something like that. But anyway, so, getting back to it. So there's probably way more footage of Sharon Tate that we haven't even seen. So it's like there could be way, way more stuff of her in this movie than you realize. But, the thing is, I was like, I wonder, okay, now this feminist reporter asked Quentin Tarantino, why wasn't she more the focus of the movie than, these two guys? Did she think to ask Mary Herron about, why didn't you make Sharon Tate more the focus of your movie rather than try to make it about these three women who, admitted to killing people, who admitted to doing really gruesome and horrible things and stuff like that? Did she think to ask Mary Herron that? Um, but see, the thing is, and I think that's personally, this is just my opinion, but I think that's why this movie succeeds over this is because even though Sharon Tate isn't the entire focus of the movie, she's in the movie. Her character really makes an impact. And the thing is like the one thing about this movie is it's a real change from the other movies made about Manson. What I mean by that is usually when you watch majority of the time when they make movies about Manson, it's very exploitation. It's very, just trying to make a gruesome movie, trying to, capitalize on the murders, trying to make them, really horrifying and stuff like that. And, it's like you got so many movies, it's like Charlie Says, you could say maybe does that to some extent. Haunting of Sharon Tate is totally exploiting the whole thing. Jim Van Bever's movie, The Manson Family. You got all these movies, where it's always about Manson and his followers. Very seldomly. I mean, like you go watch the movie The Helter Skelter Murders. There is a little bit of, they do put a little bit of in there where they try to make it a little bit about Sharon Tate and things like that. But usually the focus is mostly it's about Manson and his followers. And of course, it's all about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And they had all these orgies and things like that. And, just, oh man. So anyway, uh, and then like in the 2004 remake of Helter Skelter, there is a portion of the movie that is, um, you know, that, shows like from Sharon Tate's point of view and stuff like that, but it's not as much. But again, it's another movie where the primary focus is on Manson and his followers and stuff like that. So that's where we get to, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where, Manson says, I'm going to go in the, or not Manson, Quentin Tarantino says, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Okay. I'm going to say, like, I'm not interested in making a movie about Manson. So many people have done that already. Okay. The thing is, it's like, does anybody really know anything about Sharon Tate? These other movies where they talk, it's like these other movies, the only thing that people really know is that Sharon Tate was the actress married to Roman Polanski who got murdered. And that's all they know. They don't really go into any detail about, Sharon Tate's life or what kind of a person she was or any of that kind of stuff, which ultimately that's where Tarantino succeeded, in my opinion, is that he doesn't just show her as the movie star who gets killed. He tries to make her a person. And the thing was like actually both Quentin Tarantino and Margot Robbie, the star, went to Deborah Tate, Sharon Tate's sister, and that's the thing. I seriously doubt that Mary Herron went to Sharon Tate and said, "Hey, do you mind if I make this movie about the women who killed your sister, and your sister maybe gets like maybe 3 minutes of screen time, where it's all about the women who murdered her and everything else." I seriously doubt Mary Herron did that. And from my understanding, yeah, Deborah Tate is very, very outspoken against the Haunting of Sharon Tate. She thought that movie is an abomination, and you can understand why. And but it's like this is the oh boy, I'm gonna have to get ready to wrap this up. I'm gonna have to do a part three. All right, so anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up just for right now, and I'll make a third part, and this will be the end of it, I promise. Again, if anybody took the time to watch this, I thank you for doing it, and I appreciate you for doing it. I also hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and try to get more content. Again, for those of you who are hoping for a haul video this week, I'm sorry. I got stuff in the mail. Hopefully next week we'll get back to the, we'll get back to the hauls. I got more codes coming and everything else. So, just sit tight and everything. So I thought I'd just, hopefully, give you guys some, videos that be a little bit entertained by in the meantime. And take care. I'll see you all later. Have a good night. Bye bye.